Hello, good people, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Changemaker Table. I am your host, Lois Castillo, and today we are embarking on a journey that combines the world of fashion, culture, and social impact. Our spotlight is on the Love Dot, a brand with a mission that makes artists and brands the most desirable in the world. Before we divulge into this wonderful, remarkable story, let's dive in and meet the force behind Love Dot. So please welcome me and join me a wonderful, not only do I call her a friend, a mentor, we have a friend. What did you call it, Nneka? Introducing
Friend-tours.
friend tour. It's my
Friend-tours.
friend tour. I got a sneak peek. Nneka Unde, the founder and creator of Love Dot.
I am so incredibly excited to be here and to be a part of your first handful of episodes coming out of the Changemaker table, because I know this is such a labor of love and such a powerful impact and mission that you have with spotlighting people who are really trying to pivot and force the world to think differently about different topics that we are often just a little numb to, or just quite frankly, are just used to the status quo on. So kudos to you and thank you for giving me a little bit of a voice on your platform.
Oh, Nneka, you know, you've been around since the beginning of this labor of love, this purpose work that I have curated and you've been driving forward. So I am just honored and thankful that you said yes, because your voice is a huge voice that pushes forward. As I said, we're so excited to have you at the table. And you know me, I'm a chatty box, but this is really for us to celebrate the work that you're doing with Love Dot. So to kick things off, could you please share a little bit about your background, what inspired you to embark on this path that led to Love Dot?
Absolutely. So I background wise, my story is always very interesting because I feel like at the heart of who I am is just a storyteller who does that through a lot of different avenues. Data from a career perspective and culture,
Mhm.
but also fashion and just rewriting narratives around people who or ideas that need to be reshaped and brought to life in a different way. And so I have spent about 18 years now professionally within the advertising and marketing world as a strategist across a lot of different organizations, working on a lot of different accounts in a lot of different capacities. And I've always had a passion for being able to take that huge discipline of strategy, which at the core of it is curiosity, understanding people and markets, and seeing nuances and connecting dots, and being able to leverage that in different spaces. And so, whether it's kind of the mission I embarked upon 10 years ago with some more independent entrepreneurial endeavors of taking a lot of what I knew as a strategist and helping smaller Black owned startups in the Chicago tech ecosystem really be able to refine kind of their positioning, understand their audience a little bit better, understand how they're crafting solutions that can really match the needs of not just a consumer base, but also can really appeal to an investor. To what I'm doing now with Love Dot, which is a sustainable fashion and lifestyle brand that is built in Africa, but made for everyone. And so for me, Love Dot is such a labor of love in so many different ways. It's really an embodiment of everything I am from just existence. I always call myself a daughter of the diaspora. My mom is Mississippi born and raised, Southern country girl from obviously a completely different generation, but she's kind of old school boomer, what she has. But then my father's Nigerian, and I largely grew up with my mom's side of the family, with some moments with my father who would go back and forth quite often, but also my stepfather who is also Nigerian in Yoruba, and like just kind of growing up between two worlds, not quite always fitting in one, but always being able to pull between two different narratives and really being able to connect the dots very early on in my life. So when it came down to Love Dot, first and foremost, I've always had a passion for wanting to dive in and build my own thing. I truly believe I can build my own multi-million dollar company. I've been
Of
saying that
course
since
you
I was
can, because you're
probably
Nneka.
funny. But I've been saying that since I want to say a teenager, because entrepreneurship is ran in my blood from at least my mom's side of the family. And a lot of that was just a part of the core African American experience of coming from the South and not necessarily being able to find a way, so you had to make a way. And my grandfather was really big on just making it his own way. So he worked long enough to be able to start to invest and buy property and eventually had his own bar and own like auto mechanic shop and same thing passed down to my cousins. And even when I look at my brother and how he's like making his own way from a entrepreneurial perspective, like that's just how we function on that side of the family. And so I've always had this passion for what can I build, right? What can I do? And to be honest, it wasn't until the tragic and life-changing passing of my mom in 2016 where it became very clear to me that part of what I wanted to do was, 1, build something that was gonna honor her, and 2, build something that was going to really reflect the core of my roots, which is really being a bridge across 2 similar but different worlds, and it's something I'm passionate about because I think a lot of times Black people, in general aren't given the agency to have nuance and depth in this country or even around the world of being different, right?
Of
Whereas
course.
culturally here in the US, there's a lot of differences. Also, you just look at
Even in
the
our
fact that
diaspora.
that's my point, right? If you look at just folks who have been in this country for centuries, whether it's forcibly brought or whatnot, that's a completely different vibe depending on where you are in the country. But also, you look at immigrant population, yes, we all may look alike, but we come from vastly different backgrounds. But even if I go and look at just my own roots, being Nigerian American from my father's side and looking at that country
Mm,
and just the differences of, hey, you can say Nigerian all you want to, but are you Igbo, Yoruba, how's it? Like that matters, right? And that's not
of
just in
course.
Nigeria, but that's in every country across Africa and it has a lot of different nuances to it, a lot of beauty to it, right?
Of
And there's
course.
not enough of that being connected or celebrated. A lot of the conversations is about lack and poverty, and that in every space, including fashion, including things around lifestyle, to the point where it's being appropriated in ways that I just can't always stomach. So the love dot for me, it pays homage to my mom. The love is obviously an expression of what I feel, and the dot is a play on her name, which her first name is Dorothy, but affectionately called Dot. And it's also just an
Aw.
expression of finding these little moments or brands or techniques that are really unique and really highlight something different in the world. And so when I first started, it was really about being able to connect the world, connect people to things that are beautiful around the world. And that was just me just trying to get something started because it was also the fact that my mom liked unique things. She would be the person that would wear stuff that people were like, why are you walking around? She bought it at a flea market or she went to Chinatown, she bought something that was interesting and different. So it started as a marketplace. And I had a bunch of brands from 7 different countries that you can come and discover and shop, and I was trying to do more storytelling around them, and that got to be a bit exhausting. And as of the last 18 months, I decided to just make the full-on pivot to focusing on solely Africa and solely repositioning myself to being more driven by sustainability, and driven by the fact that you can actually build a lifestyle brand in Africa that has the same quality and impact as any other brand in the world and is made for everyone and not just a handful of people or not deemed as being subpar. And also that pulls to the forefront the people in different parts of the continent who are trying their hardest to build amazing brands through their talent that don't need to be co-opted, but need to be collaborated with and celebrated in different ways. And so that's a huge part of our model, which is first and foremost allowing me to find those artisan brands, not just makers, but brands who have the talent, collaborate with them. And when I say collaborate, we design together, right? So one of my
Wow, that's
biggest
beautiful.
collaborators is in South Africa, the brand called Beats by Flex. He does amazing handwork with beads and metals and jewelry, and he experiments a lot. And so we will go back and forth on WhatsApp with different designs that I'm coming up with. He will improve upon them, we collaborate, and then we jointly launch them here in the US as a way of getting his name and his brand into a broader global market. But then also design myself. Having that of bringing that design to life is being able to find local manufacturers in different
Mm-hmm.
countries that can help me end to end, not just create and bring the final product to life, but also source materials and or make materials. So
Mm-hmm.
everything I do in Ghana is really around the fashion part from a clothing perspective. They make every inch of fabric that I sell and also have a workshop that can bring the designs that I'm making to life. So it's a circular ecosystem of
Mm-hmm.
this part of the diaspora connecting to the other side of the Atlantic and really being able to like drive that value of what we bring to the table for each other. I know that was very long winded, but
No, it was beautiful because connected the dots. I love that. And I just want to take a moment and say that's a beautiful tribute. I know because I've worked with you and I've seen the work and the world that you create and slay. I'm a big fan of what you do. But I think the fact that you have really been intentional and to hear that you've been intentional about this work that you're doing and pivoting because this is homage to not only your mother who instilled this in you, but just your roots and educating and having impact and creating awareness of sustainability in the African diaspora because we are not all the same. Our experiences are not the same.
and probably the most populous people on this earth if you literally count us from the continent to the Caribbean to the US to everywhere else in the world that we people of African descent are actually residing, right? But
Yes.
somehow we get minimized as people of color in a broader bucket versus the more dominant from a volume and population perspective of who we really represent, right? So this is very interesting. And I think what I feel like I represent and what I'm a part of or wanting to be a part of is a new wave of D2C brands coming to the forefront, particularly within fashion or any other space that is centering their comms, their identity, even their markers of beauty around the majority of the world versus the minority of the world,
100.
right? And when
Beautiful.
I say that, like literally centered around like people of color, blackness, melanin rich skin, African descent, like that being the staple of beauty when we start to think about fashion and elegance and design and having that come through, right? Because what we do know, and this is why so much of career wise, I love what I do professionally, right?
Mhm.
No denying that. I think I was born to do strategy. I sometimes pretend like I can do a little bit of account work, but that's not my jam. Thinking, identifying trends and patterns and being able to like wax poetically about what they mean and being able to like also be a bridge from a creative perspective is what I think I do really well. And the thing that we know for a fact is that a lot of what moves mainstream culture is coming from largely underrepresented groups,
Of
right?
course.
And when I say that, it's really coming from Black communities, particularly across the US, that then starts to influence mainstream culture in the US. But I'll be honest, also mainstream culture that we see arising out of different parts of Africa. It's almost a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation because a lot of
Mhm.
what how we move and how
How
Black Americans do. Literally, if you have traveled enough around the continent, you will see that through line, not just in the food, but in the movements and the interactions. Like I can remember being in downtown Johannesburg 8, 9 years ago, and I was riding through and was on a corner. I was just like, this feels like Harlem. It's just there's through lines culturally that you can pick up and see if you're really looking for them or you're exposed enough to see them.
I wanna dig into that exposure piece. I know we have a script, but it's important because it's all connected to Love Doc. When you talk about the exposure, can you go a little deep into that when you talk about exposure? Because African Americans who've been here for centuries in that term oftentimes don't get to travel through the continent, get to that positive exposure to the diaspora.
Yeah, I think that when you think about like through lines and those points of connection, like, and I do think that some of it could be possibly shifting and eroding a bit as society here becomes far less in certain communities communal and more individualistic. But if you think about even being in the South, right? And I didn't grow up in the South. One half of my family is from the deep South, but I spent enough time going back and forth. That sense of hospitality, the sense of welcoming people in, that's such a uniquely communal kind of like for kin, no matter where you are on the continent, kind of component of who we are. right? Like
Mhm.
I had growing up to hear my mom talk about stories about my grandparents when they moved up here in the 50s. And like people would just be like, show up at the house.
Mhm.
They didn't know them from a hole in the wall, but they needed a place to stay. And all of a sudden they had a place to stay.
Of
Right.
course. Yeah.
That's still very there's nothing weird about that. It's weird about that now here culturally in the US. But if you really think about if I'm talking to someone who may be in Ghana or Nigeria, and it's nothing to have a friend call you and be like, hey, this person needs a place to stay. Can they stay with you? That just core of welcoming, hospitality, and just communal type living. Even being in the moment I was discussing earlier about being in Joburg 8, 9 years ago and driving through and just seeing these moments where it was like just the way this woman was just standing on the corner,
Mhm.
waiting across the street, just reminding me of even her posture and her demeanor of just someone standing in Harlem or even here on the south side of Chicago, just the way we move or interact or even how we speak to each other. Where sometimes it's like, I tend to look at you and you're not familiar culturally with who you're talking to or the nuances that define us. It's like, are you mad? The Caribbean to West Africa, East Africa, South Africa to here. Getting animated about when you passionate about something has nothing to do with anger or disrespect. It's
Mhm.
how you communicate and it's almost understood. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like here things aren't changing a bit, but it's just how it is. Even if you look at some things around food, right? I don't know. I'm trying to think of a real good example off the top of my head, but there was a documentary that was on Netflix. The brother went through time. He actually wound up going to parts of West Africa and like the food journey. I don't know how long I think it was called. And he had a moment of just highlighting the certain okra-based dishes, right?
Mhm.
Or case in point, looking at something like jambalaya, which has a
Mhm.
lot of similarities to trying to be on jollof, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Or it's all these things that are like connection points that are to some degree watered down because they originated here. And it's almost like that recipe or that moment or that story in the family that never gets written down, but everybody remembers it and keeps getting passed down generation to generation, like the generational game of telephone. And by the
Course.
time you hear it's quite the same,
Yeah.
but it has remnants of it, right? You can see the remnants of our history and ancestry and everything we do, regardless of one deny it or not. And I think the biggest challenge that we have right now in the US as a country is this idea of reinstating supremacy as the country starts to shift and change from a demographic perspective by erasing and eroding people's history or making people feel bad for being connected to a history that was rooted in a lot of pain, but also has connection somewhere else. Which, to be honest, there's not a single person in this country, unless you are indigenous to this land, that does not have a history that is rooted somewhere else. So, yes, African Americans are Americans, but you also are African too. You just don't know where sometimes.
Of course.
If white Americans are Americans, they're probably also part British or Scandinavian or something else. Because guess what? Nobody is rooted here. So that connecting the dots in that way, whether it's something as downstream as fashion or upstream as like history and ideals, is just something I'm really passionate about. And Love Dot is just a way for me to be able to take one little slither and be able to tell a story and make a connection that I think is valuable, but also do it in a way where I'm not appropriating any part of tradition because I'm really not just paying homage to my mom, but also giving a stakehold to emerging companies and
Yeah.
brands, not individual people who are makers and just try to earn a living wage, but people who try to build something tangible. And let's collaborate and do it together. Let me
I,
help you launch and connect to a consumer here.
I love that because it's having impact on the culture and creating change. This journey you've been on is truly remarkable. And when we think about any venture, we have our notable achievements and milestones. So could you share a little bit about your work with Love Dot? What has been one of your proudest moments thus far? Because I know you're still on a journey. Love Dot ain't going
Oh
nowhere.
yeah, it's a journey, honey. And this is the journey. This is the year of the pivot. Because like to be honest, it was funny because like pandemic was a time in which I felt like, oh, I should have really accelerated, but it was also hard because it was also a time where I was trying to do something global and the whole world was shut down. I had ordered stuff and I couldn't even get it through the border. So it was like almost losing money to a certain extent for certain things. So it just put me flat-footed, and I was trying to figure some things out, and you wind up spending a lot of money and wasting a lot of money as you try to learn and in the process. But I can honestly say this year has been a year of clarity and growth in ways that I never expected. I think one of the biggest kind of accomplishments that I've had this year was taking a risk and tapping into a regional market that was a huge part of my customer base to be in like East Coast, particularly in the DMV area, taking a moment to launch in show fields, which is experiential retailer that's largely East Coast, but is really designed to help brands tell their story, but also connect and sell product, right? And for me, it was so important as I started to think through earlier what was the pivot from marketplace that was struggling to really get traction to really being very focused on something that people can really get behind and feel passionate about and that I can feel passionate about from a storytelling perspective. That was something I can really grow into in a different way. The Showfields thing just felt right because it was like, okay, so I have ample space in the store to tell my story, to show videos, to connect people through digital activations, like low tech to
Yeah.
high tech, like scan this QR code. And now you get the story of behind the brand or the maker of the fabric or Beats by Flex plus Love dot collaboration and what inspires him from a design perspective as being a young South African who is really taking his traditional techniques and trying to make them ready for the world, right? And it was something I thought was really needed. Like it was beautiful store in Georgetown, very aligned to the clientele that had purchased this before, but also who I kind of recognizing as like my target in terms of who buys us the most. And so that has been the last 6 months of just being there and the brand being there, not me being there, but it's opened a lot more doors. So it's like open doors for other potential retail opportunities also in DC where I don't have to be there, but the brand can be there. Being able to have enough range to be able to go to other retailers, like boutique retailers, right? In other markets that have a similar clientele, like we're bringing something unique and different to it and start those conversations. So it's been a huge opportunity for growth. And I think it's just so much more to go as I look at things that are opening up now, whether it's different workshop opportunities or just different ways in which I can really rethink how I want to launch and grow the brand in a way that is also conducive to everything else that I have going on from a full time day job perspective. So that has been really big for me. And I think to date, one of the bigger milestones. But I would say the biggest has just been getting clear about the pivot and not being afraid to take the pivot. And we underestimate the power of your accomplishments being something that not always something that other people can see, but
Mm.
sometimes things that only you can see, that only you can be brave enough to do, and that you are bold enough to actually take the risk to do. And that's huge because the one thing about this entrepreneurial journey is that everybody's a talking head, everybody can tell you what they think that you should do. Very few people know, even the people who have made it, unless they are a 4X, 2 to 4X founder, they really don't have anything substantial to tell you that is blueprint-esque because we're all trying to figure it out. And some people are just savvier, have better networks, get hit with a little spark of grace and luck earlier on in their journey. But everybody who started something big has probably failed either
Mm.
early days in a different venture or as that big thing grew, failed at something else that they were trying to do within that big thing, right? To me, being brave enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to shut this thing down. It may not be working the way I want it to, but there is something else that I can do differently. And let's see where it goes. And being courageous enough to make that move, I think has been probably my biggest accomplishment today because it really did set me up for a lot of other opportunities that have come from that. Right? That I don't think I would have gotten if I was still in this one thing, it's the marketplace or it's this thing that I like, it's gotta work this way. Right?
I get excited listening to you talk about that because that's what change makers are. You believe in yourself, you take the risk, and you make a bold move. What really stuck out to me is where you said it can be something others don't see. Can you share a little bit about what was that thing that you were like, it don't have to be this way. It can be this way to open it up for that big achievement.
Well, I guess that's what I was just like highlighting, right? Like the original model for Love Dot was more focused on like, it's this artisan marketplace that's open to discovery, right? 25 brands from 7 different countries. that you can come and explore. But it just felt like an online boutique. That was nothing that was uniquely different with a wide range of price points. That in theory, discovery sounds amazing, but the execution of it can be hard and expensive, especially when you're having money, because discovery denotes you being able to create digital and other types of experiences that lead people down a rabbit hole that forces them to want to buy. And when I say that, I mean discovery of like different brands that they don't even know that they want and or can trust the quality of, which for me had done all the inspection and really being very clear about the intentional about the brands that I was bringing on board. Loved that in the early days because it was like, one, is this something I would actually buy and wear? And two, is this something I think could really appeal to who we ideally think is our core audience? But the challenge became is like nobody knows me to be able to validate whether or not
Yes.
it's quality because I don't have not a big influencer and yet building that reputation as you're also building a brand in a
Hmm.
marketplace. And that was difficult. Also, I think there's the much bigger platforms like Etsy that's known for discovery. And
Yeah.
it also has some mixed ratings in terms of if you're going to get great quality or not so great quality of the people who are on there selling. So I just thought about it. I was just like, but at the core, it's like, do I really want to be just a boutique? Do I really just want to be a digital space where you can come and shop other people's stuff? Or do I want to bring my own creativity both in how I tell stories, but also as a design like, I design. I actually sketch things out. I actually, like, can draw well enough to say, "This is how I want something to fit on a human body," and understand a little bit about construction, I won't lie, but enough that
Enough to be
dangerous, and I'm
just
trying to get
yeah.
more dangerous because I do believe that you need to know every element of whatever it is that you're doing, enough to be able to ask smart questions. But it was just really I like beautiful things, and I would like to design things that I think would look beautiful on people, but also have purpose and intention and aren't a waste of dollars since they can last in your closet or your wardrobe or even in your home for quite some time. And there's a beautiful story behind it because you purchase with purpose and intention because you purchased
That.
something that was supporting not just a small or that you love from a small business, but also that helped to build two different economic communities, right? So from a small business community here in the US to a small business community in Johannesburg or Accra or wherever else we wind up like collaborating with in the future. So that was like the biggest for me, like really shifting the model to refocus. And there's some trepidation with it too, because for me, I was like, I'm going to double down on the thing I love the most, which is exploring my roots, the connection to the continent and all of it, not just one part of it. Just I don't think people realize how beautiful broadly Africa is, from the people to the landscapes to even the talent that you see. And wanting to explore that holistically and really do that in a way that also helped to impact people's lives and really brought the power of I can't think of how many $1 billion of a consumer market the US is to the doorstep of people, brands that are trying to figure out how to grow and expand and have talents that should really take them around the world.
That's beautiful. I can't even express the fact that just your pivot and the mission of Love Dot and taking where you come from and your ancestry and using those gifts to create a platform for others and break down barriers that bring them to the state, bring the awareness to their brands and their talents, and for you to tap into your own to find those collaborations that give you life, that pay homage to who you are and you come from. As we talk about the impact of Love Dot, how do you envision your work making like the future, 5 years? Like, what's the positive impact on society do you want to make?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that I can think of right now from an impact perspective is that I want to be able to be such a catalyst for at least the two partners that I have, one in South Africa, one in Ghana, where the growth of Love Dot means the growth of them and their businesses and their
Mhm.
ability to employ more people locally, as well as my ability to actually employ people here. Like really being able to give people opportunity in that way. I think there's a lot of other things I could think about in terms of like where I want to be and certain types of things I want to do, where I want how the business I want the business to grow. But the core of it is that I really want to use this point of collaboration as a way of expanding the horizons of the people who are connected to me. And if I can look up and say in 5 years that Love Dot is maybe $1 million business, and I know that can truly be well way more of that, but sorry, bigger than just a million, but the $1 million business, and we may be running a pretty decent margin, but we've been able to employ and build the partnerships around us,
Mhm.
right? Other partners that we have in different markets are growing and are thriving and have hit a certain threshold. Even if that threshold exceeds us, that to me is impact, because I do believe that there's a balance between people and profit,
Mhm.
and that I do think also in this world that certain levels of wealth and excess are just like, why? Can't fit in this lifetime. So what are you really doing with it? And I really want this to be a platform for expansion for brands, right? And that I'm a part of, right? I'm not trying to be out here poor. I want to live the life that I want to live. So don't get me wrong in that. It's not all goodwill all the time, but it's also about being able to make sure that I'm scaling in a smart way. I'm scaling with my partners in mind. So it's not just about Love Dot, but it's a Love Dot plus. Like these
Love that.
folks that helped me get here, but also that just brings back a level of opportunity that can be spread across these different communities that are helping me. When I say communities, my brand partners, right? Love Dot times Beat by Flex has created 3 collaborations or capsule
Mm.
collections, with a fourth one coming, right? If that is something that winds up catching fire, where our collaborations start to pick up in more boutiques and more retailers and online sales scale, then for Beat by Flex, that means that you gotta get some folks there trained and paid to be able to help build that workshop around you, not just to supply our items that we're collaborating on and producing together exclusively, but for you to also be able to have people who can actually make the things that you traditionally do, that now you may have more of an avenue to be able to get them into broader retail because you now have this credibility behind our collaborations to go forward. You see?
Yeah,
So
I
from
do.
that one man shop to multiple employed skilled workers helping him build his brand, just like any other brand would do here in the West. But doing that through first and foremost being us being a launching pad for making that happen, through our design and collaboration moments.
I know you personally, NECA, and I know the drive, and I've seen how you can push it forth here and in the work. I know that you are more than capable of having Love Dot being exactly what you want it to be
Yeah, I just don't
because
want the
of who you are.
wrinkles in the process.
Well,
I'm trying to stay youthful. Youthful.
you did you full you I'm not worried about your wrinkles because you won't have them,
I don't
correct?
have them yet. I don't have.
We
They
don't
bet.
crack.
I bet not. They better be like my mom and don't crack at surprise. I don't do
Yeah, we
celebrates.
yes.
So I'm like, oh my god.
Yes. So,
Anyway,
you have good lineage, I'm not worried about the cracks, we don't crack.
right. They come.
They come, but
It's a
I think is
couple decades delayed.
yes. As we come to a close of this conversation, I feel that I met a new side of you. As close as we are, I didn't know all of that, that's why I wanted to dive in. I knew a little bit, I'd be stalking and be in the business about Love Dot, but to learn the journey and to see the path forward that you've designed and you're co-designing. What advice would you give individuals to our listeners who are aspiring to make a difference in their perspective field? They may not be kings of fashion or entrepreneurship, but what advice and any key lessons you've learned that you wish you would have known?
I wish I'd known that nobody knows what they're doing. Just people posture, and you take that posturing as being some level of they're better, they have more X, Y, and Z. Confidence is your biggest weapon in most things. And it was funny. What's her name? She's one of the Shark Tank judges,
Yeah.
Barbara Cochran. She was in real estate, or maybe she still is. But she just had a moment, like some viral reel that I go through, come on Instagram, where she was getting her makeup done, but she was talking about early in her career, how one coat changed the trajectory of her career. She was being facetious, but the point was is that when she was first starting off in her career, she really couldn't afford much, right? And so when she first finally made her first sale, she went off to Bergdorf Goodman and splurged with her first check on this really expensive coat. And it's a little crazy, but the point that she made, I wore that coat out. But the thing about that coat was that because of the look and how I felt in it, it created a perception around me with people that almost eventually, like all the work, all the opportunities eventually met to the perception that people already had of me. So showing up, looking good, wearing confidence, even if you are naked underneath your coat, and not saying you have this is the difference between having a skill set and confidence, but not necessarily having the track record yet versus having a lot of confidence, no skill set, no track record. Two very different things. I'm talking about those of us who have the skill set, are maybe having moments where our confidence is waning and just are looking to be able to deploy that hunger and that drive and that skill set and the right opportunities to build that track record and just need a chance. Do not allow your moments of doubt on anything keep you from making the first step because you're looking for a blueprint or you're trying to figure out if you're doing the right thing or if you're going to mess up. You may, but you'll learn in the process. And here's the thing, the more you push forward and the more you run through that barrier of doubt and fear and come on the other side, it's nothing but fuel for, oh, if I just did that and I didn't know what I was doing, I can do the next thing. And now I have more experience under my belt. And that's both like an entrepreneurial lesson and as well as a career lesson. Folks don't know what they're doing. It's about confidence and how they're showing up to the table. And you can always tell people who like have the confidence but lack the skill set because they're the people who will say the same thing somebody else just said in the room, but in a completely different way. And just thank you for that. But that was
Thank
nothing materially different.
you for parroting that wonderful idea.
Right. Thank you for the piggyback on top of the piggyback. But I think that would be the biggest one. The other thing is that I had one of my old bosses early in my career made a comment to me. He was just like, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good," which I know is some type of Buddhist or like ancient.
Say that again. That's beautiful. Say that
Don't
again.
let the don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I like that.
And that's absolutely true. Everything in life is a testament to just starting. Even if you look at the biggest companies that we all love and engage with now, if you look at the first products that they brought to market versus where they are now, it's nothing but evolution.
Mm.
But what they brought first to the forefront was something that was good enough for people to believe in. And then they allowed that to be approved upon for the next iteration and the next and the next and the next. And that's how you get to a place where you're able to actually see growth. If you're always hesitating to put something out there because it's not good enough or it's not to the standard that you want it to have, you're never going to see that growth, period. And that's whether it's career or entrepreneurially or anything, whether it's something you want to do in a community. You don't need permission to do things. You just need to be crazy enough to want to do them. And eventually your tribe will find you. And that probably should be the biggest thing that people pray for is that the tribe that is meant to help you bring things to life for them to find you. Let your helpers find you, as I think Lovey has said before. Let the people open yourself up to having those individuals, those people walk into your life and meet you at your moment of need so that you can get to a place where you can actually get more things accomplished. And I think that's something that's really important that we need to remember. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Some people just posture a little better. We all have doubt, but the biggest thing is you got to let your focus and your passion and your interest be just a little bit louder than your doubt. And don't allow yourself to be held back because you're waiting for things to be perfect when good enough is good enough.
That is so important because good enough is good enough. I love that. I just want to take a moment and just say thank you. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey, the story of Love Dot with us, your dedication to fashion and beautiful things and social impact. Is truly inspiring. So again, thank you, Nneka. That brings us to an end of another aligning episode of the Changemaker Table. We hope you've been inspired to combine your passion with your purpose and make a difference in the world. I want to say to all my listeners, remember that change starts with a vision and a single step. So keep pushing boundaries and we'll see you at our next episode.